Hello and welcome to Moneylife. This is Sucheta Dalal. 4 weeks into this lockdown, and many of us are waiting for it to be lifted. People are even talking about a post-COVID world as though things are going to come to an end, we've beaten the virus, and it's going to be life as usual. Is it? I don't think so. I think all of us have to prepare for a new reality where the world is going to be different. We are going to be different. How we react to things is going to be different. We're going to think twice before we catch the next flight. And remember, this is a virus that came to India by flights via the rich and the affluent, and it's decimating our economy and the poorest of Indians. Let's take a look at what really is happening. So, we have a virus which has caused the first ever major pandemic that any of us have seen in our lifetimes. All the geographical boundaries that we were so proud of having destroyed, they are turning out to be the biggest facilitator for this virus, and countries will have no option but to begin to prepare for a world where newer pandemics are going to be carried super fast on planes because of our connected world, and look at creating walls and barriers. So long as we have our scientific geniuses weaponizing microbes and creating new germs even in laboratories, nobody even knows what is the source of corona or COVID-19. And that is the far bigger reality that we have to live with. The grim possibility that there's going to be more and more pandemics if we don't change how we live. So there's going to be a post-COVID world which is different. It's not going to be business as usual. Many of us think that we've learned to live online. We are all into Zoom conferences or working from home, connected through technology. But who's to say that there's not going to be another COVID-19 that affects the tech world? Because we know that viruses that affect the internet are far more deadly. And we have to be prepared that even that could cause as much destruction or maybe more, because we could lose our very identities as well as our wealth, which we so complacently believe is stashed in paperless clouds protected by encryption. Until the world proves differently and we see a new reality, we are complacent. I think it's time to start thinking about all this. But what worries me and is of great concern is that everything that happens, wherever it comes from, whether it comes from geniuses developing technology or biotechnology, the impact is finally on the poorest of Indians. Look at what has happened in India. So you have migrants who are living in places like Bombay and our bigger cities, in slums and shanties, 10 to 20 people to a room. Naturally, they don't want to move away from those places, which is their little patch that belongs to them. The governments do not want to let them go home. They've been stopped, they've been punished, they've been treated as criminals. And yet, the standards are completely different when it comes to the middle class and the rich. So when Corona started, we sent flights, very proudly sent flights all over the world to bring back rich Indians. We did not even force them into a proper quarantine. They continued as usual, passing on this disease to their domestic help and other caregivers, their drivers, and from there, you have the community spread. Even today, yes, I feel sorry for students who are locked up at Kota away from their parents, but we sent 500 buses to them. MLA in Kerala sent buses to get pilgrims back. But what about fishermen who've been stranded in various parts of the country? Mr. E.S. Sarma, former Secretary to the Government of India, has written a letter to the Prime Minister to point out these double standards and how cruel they are. Because some fishermen who sailed back over 5 days, came hot and tired, have not only been quarantined, but they have criminal cases filed against them. Mr. Sarma points out that we have one set of laws for those advantageously placed in life and another for the downtrodden majority. The worst affected, like he says, are migrant labor, whose treatment brings out the stark inequality in India. And it's not just about migrant workers and how they are treated. The bigger issue is what happens with people who are cleaning up after us, the sanitation workers. For the first few weeks, they did not even have enough equipment. And this is something I personally know through the relief work that I'm doing, that when the first deaths occurred in Bombay, apparently even the sanitation workers did not want to pick up the bodies because these were fully government employed employees on permanent employment, and they didn't want to get affected by the disease. Maybe because they didn't have enough protective gear, but they didn't want to do it because we have created a system in Bombay where all the dirty work is passed on to contract labor. So they wanted the contract labor coming in, and the contract labor and non-permanent employees did not even have protective gear. Isn't it outrageous? As surprising as it seems, the academics have pointed out that we need mechanization. Their core point is that India needs to move to mechanization. This is something I strongly agree with because we have to put an end to being able to live with filth. All of us in India are willing to live with dirt, with filth, whether it's on the roads. If we are going to have to fight pandemic after pandemic, this is something that will have to go, and it's not going to happen with people physically sweeping our streets. You need to go into mechanization. Now, several years ago, I had looked at this and discovered that one of the reasons why we don't move to automated cleaning, which is faster and cleaner and can happen multiple times a day, is because there is opposition. There's opposition to mechanized cleaning because it means that there'll be less jobs at the bottom of the pyramid. And this is something that has support even from the political class as well as people who are employed, because there's a lot of money to be made in India by getting permanent government employment to people. It creates vote banks. So we have lived for decades in spite of technology. So you have, and Moneylife has written about it, you have robots which can clean sewers. You have machines that can not just sweep the street but wash the street and vacuum them. We walk our dogs without cleaning up the shit after them. We have machines that can do it if it doesn't have to be done by humans, but we do not invest in it. Not because we don't have the money. We have a lot of money for absolutely wasteful projects, but we are not putting money into mechanization because there is opposition from entrenched unions. Will COVID be an opportunity to say you can't have your cake and eat it too? So if you don't have mechanization, you're not going to have contract labor, which is doing the dirty work of sweeping the streets, having dust blown in their face, aerosol affliction, because community spread is not something that's going to worry only them. It has to worry everybody, including the rich who are getting their dogs walked on the street and otherwise have nothing to do with the dirt and the filth. We have to change our way of life. And this is a time when we need to look closely at what is it that we're doing to ourselves, what is the world that we are moving towards, and whether political interests are going to decide what we do. Unfortunately, we have little say over policy, not just in India, but in most democratic countries. India is not unique in the fact that we suffer the consequences of policy which is sometimes faulty. We've seen what's happened in Europe, we've seen what's happened in the US. The number of deaths are more than 20 times what India has faced. In fact, India looks relatively good as compared to them. But we have to know. We have also looked at international bodies like the WHO, which was clueless about this pandemic. It started out by saying no need to wear masks, then said you cannot step out on the street without a mask. And honestly, nobody knows. Is it the climate? Is it other care that you take? We are learning and we're discovering. The bottom line is that the world is going to be different. Post-COVID is not going to be back to normal. Post-COVID has to mean a whole bunch of different things where public health, public interest has to take precedence over narrow political interests. We have to forget about vote banks, we have to forget about trade union politics, and we have to look at making the world safer. Are we willing to do it? If each of us begins to understand the implications of what it means to try and be the same that we were, we will wake up and we will demand some answers. Thank you.